Little impromptu bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks because Jalon Daniels, quarterback one for Kansas, had knee surgery.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. This is not our normal recording studio, but we wanted to get this news out to you as soon as possible. So thanks for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you to every day for catching each and every show. And thank you for catching it anywhere you get your podcast, as well as our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. So wanted to get to this breaking news because it is a big thing, and we're going to get into it. We're going to get into, I think, some interesting terminology and how this injury is being described by KU, and also the impact on, or is there no impact, right? Is this just going to be a minor thing that has no, negative impact on Jalon Daniels or the KU football season? We'll get into all that on today's episode of the show. Let's get right into the news, though. This was sent out, a KU release. Jordan Gusky, Capital Journal, Michael Swain, 24/7 Sports, Fog.net, like all those guys were tweeting it out. So you might have seen it on social media already. But here's what the release said, quote, Kansas quarterback Jalon Daniels recently underwent a minor knee procedure. It was successful, and he will be a limited participant during spring practice. So, a couple things to unpack there. Obviously, Jalon Daniels has had to deal with injury stuff in the past with KU, right? This guy has had to deal with, back injuries and all sorts of other things that or the back injury a couple of years ago. There was the, what was it, a separated shoulder? All the injuries are blending together at this point in time in 2022. Basically, he has had a long list of injuries, and that's the reason he's still in college at Kansas and probably, hasn't been able to go off early to the NFL or something like that. But anytime you see knee procedure, I don't normally see, that correlated with the word minor. So I think that certainly is interesting. The fact that he's going to be a limited participant in spring practice, it kind of all depends, what is the limited participation? Does that just mean that he's just going to be there, soaking up the play calling and, being around the team, and that he won't have to just be sitting, in a wheelchair with a leg in a boot? Or does that mean, he's going to actually be able to, he's not going to be able to be in full pad drills or, shoulder pad and helmet drills, but he'll be able to at least take dropbacks and throw the football. The severity of that certainly will have an impact on things, to say the least. But I am curious about that word minor. And again, going back to the idea of what is the impact here on Jalon Daniels, I do think this is a little bit scary to me based on some stuff last season, based on the past injury stuff, and based on his game. So I want to get into that. Let's discuss. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time, where you can get tickets to sports, concert, comedy, theater, anything going on near you. And with Game Time, it's, in my opinion, it just makes everything a lot better because, you might be stressing out thinking you want to get tickets to a game and it might be last minute. Well, you pop up the Game Time app and boom, you can find tickets. You can look for a specific section. You can, maybe you're in a stadium you've never been to. You can see the seat views from the app. So just download the app, have it. It's super great for, checking out ticket prices wherever you are. And if you're ready to make your next event even better, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you can get $20 off your first purchase. Again, download Game Time today and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I continue on in this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Again, apologies, this is not our recording studio. I'm currently on lunch from work right now, so I wanted to get this out there because this is pretty pertinent stuff. So going back to the quote that was said about it specifically, again, it says a minor knee procedure. There are, minor procedures, right? There are things where, maybe it's just through a scope or it's you're in and out in a short period of time, and it's same day walkout and stuff like that, right? That is the case. But when you think of knee injuries, again, you don't normally think minor stuff. And now you think about a guy who's had knee and back issues. He sounds like me in my 30s. So I look at it here, and I'm sitting there going, with the injury history not being great, and I go back to when he had that back injury. I don't know that Lance Leipold ever actually officially used the term minor. If he did, somebody hit me up on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio and would love to see that. I did find an old UDK article where it mentioned the early part of the season in 2023 that Jalon Daniels was nursing a minor back injury. So I don't know if that was something that Lance Leipold directly quoted or it was just kind of hinted that way. But certainly when you look back to that back injury, it was not real. Like, we weren't really fully disclosed what was going on from the beginning there. And it felt like it was undersold how severe it really ended up being for Jalon and for KU. And I think that has to scare you a little bit here, right? Like, it's impossible not to view back at what happened there and then view this and be like, well, how do we know for sure that the same thing isn't happening here, that you're saying it's minor, but it is more than that? Now, again, like, I am trusting this, that it is going to be a minor thing, that I am trusting that he's going to be QB1 for the first week of the season, but it's impossible not to get that off, from the back of your mind, of course. And if it truly is like that minor, I had somebody reach out to me. I don't know if he wants me to use his name, so I won't say it, but I had somebody reach out to me and was like, hey, if it really is that minor, why not wait till the end of spring football? Why not wait till the end of spring practice and then have the procedure, right? Because then you have a couple months before the start of fall camp. If it's that minor, just play through it for spring ball, then have it for those couple months in the off season, and then boom, you're back by the regular season anyway. So just how minor really is this, right? And I think that's a very fair point that you could bring up and that you could talk to with all this. But yeah, obviously, for a guy who does run the football, for a guy who likes to scramble out and they like to get on the move and throwing downfield, like, is it can have any impact on that? I want to discuss that, but I also want to discuss an interesting thing, because I think last year at the beginning of the year, Jalon Daniels looked a little bit rusty, and we were trying to figure out at the beginning of last year, like, how much of the struggles early in the season was the coordinator? How much was it Jalon was rusty? How much was it just a bad level of play or some weird things happened? But if you do think there was some rust involved from him missing spring ball, last year, being limited in spring ball last year, what does that mean for this year? Because now you're kind of in a similar situation. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by PrizePicks, where you can just pick more or less on as little as 2 up to 6 different players throughout different sports. You can go to the NFL with the big game going on. Right now they have a promo going for Patrick Mahomes to have more than 0.5 passing yards. So that's a gimme. And then just combine that with something else and boom, you're ready to go. You can combine it with something from college basketball, right? You want to do it with Hunter Dickinson, more points or whatever. You can also get some other ones from the Chiefs, Travis Kelce. You can get on DeAndre Hopkins. His is only 12.5 receiving yards. Basically, can he have like 1 big catch or 2 catches in the game? I think he's been dealing with some injury stuff, but maybe the week off in between the Super Bowl will help him out, and he's playing in his first Super Bowl. Like, maybe that's one that you're interested in. Patrick Mahomes' rushing total is more than 30.5 rushing yards. You can do that and a lot of others with PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, use code LOCKEDONCollege at PrizePicks to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game with PrizePicks. Finishing things up, and thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We had another bonus episode talking about one of KU football's newest commits, which they got a pretty big one with the last name of Punt. Great name overall, Drayden Punt, who's a 3-star, 6'7" defensive end. So check out that episode. Also check out our KU basketball, looking at the next year's lineup episode. We'll have a KU K-State preview coming on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Jayhawks as well. Okay, so here's where the big question is, like, what impact will this have with Jalon Daniels' injury or the minor knee procedure? Like, there's a chance that this has no, effect on anything, that it is really minor, that he, is a limited participant, that he is still throwing the ball and doing a little bit of work during spring ball, that during the summer off season, he's able to, get time with his receivers and all these guys and find those connections and continue that through fall practice. And he's ready to go by week 1, and as an experienced player, who's dealt with some injuries in the past, like, he's going to be good to go, and this is going to be no worry, and he's going to look like the Jalon that we saw in the second half of the season and pick up right where he left off, right? There's a complete chance that could be the case, and that is obviously the hope for, I think, a lot of Kansas fans. But, you do wonder, like, okay, if it's a knee injury, how does this affect him running the football, right? Is he going to be as agile? Is he going to be as athletic Is it going to lead to, not wanting to take as many hits running the football where, just having the ability for him to be a strong runner becomes more important? I don't know that that one will, to be completely honest, because when you look at the past back injuries he had, like he ran the ball a good amount this past season, even after having some of the back injuries. So I don't think that will have as much an impact there, but it is a question that is a valid one coming in the season. The big question for me is what impact does this have on the rust level for Jalon Daniels? You look at the start of last season, the stats, the eye test, whatever you want to talk about, the first, 5 games or so for Jalon Daniels last season were not nearly as good as the final 7 games. The final 7 games looked like the guy we saw in more limited time, but from 2022 and 2023. Whereas the first 5 games looked like more of the true freshman version of Jalon. And again, how much of that was the offensive coordinator? How much of that was, just weird circumstances and weird things happening in specific games? Or just maybe things snowballing where you have a couple bad, plays and then you let it snowball and turn it into more than it is. I don't know. But it's hard not to look at it and say, okay, Jalon, was limited in spring ball last year. I think in fall practice last season, some of the receivers were dealing with some injury stuff, and they struggled to maybe find that chemistry early in the season. And it's hard not to view the start of last season and say, yeah, maybe there is a little bit of an element to the slow start being shaking the rust off. And it took him a bit of time to shake that rust off and look more like the player that we were accustomed to seeing. And if that is a valid concern or a real thing that happened, it's hard not to view this and say, oh, so the same thing's happening. He's going to be a limited participant in spring practice. Is he going to be rusty to start the season? And I think what makes it even scarier is think about the guys he's throwing to. Even if some of those receivers were injured and they had to shake some rust off themselves or reestablish their connections last season, Jalon Daniels had been throwing to Quentin Skinner and Luke Graham and LJ Arnold for years now. He hasn't been throwing to Levi Wentz. He hasn't been throwing to Cam Pickett. He hasn't been throwing to Emmanuel Henderson. He hasn't been throwing to Bryson Canty or, this group of 4 incoming freshmen that you have coming in. It's a brand new receiver room, basically, for KU. And so there is more of an expedited need to establish that chemistry and to shake that rust off now in spring, in the summer, before you get to the start of the season, because you don't have those past relationships and, trust level on the football field that you were able to establish with those receivers. And if there was a shaking the rust process with experienced receivers, what is it going to be with a host of all new guys? And that'll be the big question for me of how this affects that. And again, the amount of limited availability for Jalon will be a part of that. I also think that this just probably ramps up the importance of the QB2 battle, because I think it's again, like I'm fully expecting Jalon Daniels to be your starter QB1 week 1 of the season and all that stuff. But it is a good reminder that like injuries do happen, and we've seen this guy get injured before. Kind of ramps up in the back of your mind again, like, okay, Cole Ballard, Isaiah Marshall, David McComb coming in. Who's going to win that QB2 battle? Can Marshall take a big leap this year? Will Ballard take a leap? Will David McComb just blow everybody away? That becomes an even more impressive storyline. But also, I think in a weird way, like I've been talking, these are obviously possible negatives here. There is the one possible positive out of this in that QB2 battle, and that would be that at the very least, you're probably giving out more reps now to those 3 guys. And some of those reps are going to come with the ones. I think in a lot of ways, like we haven't totally known what level of development Isaiah Marshall went under in year 1. I think you're going to learn a lot more during this spring ball about where those 3 quarterbacks stand among each other, because you're going to get more reps and more opportunities with the top end guys. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Again, apologies for the little bit of impromptu recording studio here, but thought this was pretty pertinent, important news with the Jalon Daniels injury stuff. And hopefully he's all right and good to go. And hopefully this truly is minor, but certainly could be some interesting repercussions regardless of what happens. So we'll see you next time on Locked On Jayhawks. Again, check out our other episodes today. You can find those anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. See you then with LOJ.